I found out my neighbor built a balcony over my backyard while I was gone for a week. And the craziest part wasn't the balcony. It was how casually they acted about it. Like building part of their house over someone else's property was just normal. And standing there in my backyard that afternoon staring up at it, I remember thinking the same thing over and over in my head. You have got to be kidding me. Now, to understand why this got under my skin the way it did, you need to know something about that backyard. I bought my house in 2018. Small 2-story place outside Columbus, Ohio. Nothing fancy. Beige siding, older roof, squeaky deck boards that complain every time you step on them. The kind of house people drive past without noticing. But the backyard, that was the whole reason I bought the place. The lot runs deep, way deeper than most properties in the neighborhood. There's this big old maple tree right near the center, probably older than half the houses on the street. And when the leaves come in during the summer, it throws this huge blanket of shade across the yard. When I first walked the property with the realtor, she said something like, "Most people see the house first." I remember looking past it and saying, "Yeah, but look at this yard. 3 sides fenced, no direct windows looking down into it. Quiet, private. It's the kind of space where you could sit outside with a beer at night and actually hear crickets instead of traffic." I had just gotten back from a long overseas rotation with the National Guard at the time. All I really wanted was somewhere peaceful, somewhere that felt like mine. For a few years, that's exactly what it was. Then the house behind mine sold. The old place back there used to belong to a retired couple. Nice people, quiet, mostly kept to themselves. They had a small ranch house and a garden that looked like something out of a magazine. When they moved away, the property sat empty for a couple months. Then one morning, a big black pickup rolled up with a construction trailer behind it. And not long after that, I met the new owners, a couple named Travis and Lindsay Carter. They seemed friendly enough at first. Late 30s maybe. Travis had that energetic real estate guy vibe, always talking fast like he was pitching something. Lindsay was quieter, but very polished, always dressed like she had somewhere important to be. Travis introduced himself over the fence one afternoon while I was trimming the maple tree. He leaned over and said, "Hey man, just wanted to give you a heads up. We're probably going to tear this place down." I looked over at the house. "You mean remodel?" "Nope," he said, grinning like he'd just told a great joke. "Full rebuild. We're doing our forever home." He said it like those 2 words meant something sacred. Forever home. I shrugged and told him good luck with it. Truth is, I didn't love the idea of 8 months of construction behind my yard, but it wasn't my property. And around here, people rebuild houses all the time. Neighborhood changes. Things get updated. I figured it would be noisy for a while. Then life would go back to normal. That was my first mistake. 2 months later, the old house was gone. Completely gone. Just a dirt lot and a temporary chain fence around it. Then the framing started. Every morning around 7 sharp, you'd hear nail guns popping like someone setting off firecrackers. Truck idling, workers shouting measurements back and forth, dumpsters parked half in the street, contractors using my mailbox posts to lean ladders against little stuff like that. Nothing illegal exactly, just the kind of things that slowly wear on you. Still, I kept my mouth shut because construction doesn't last forever. Eventually, the structure started to take shape, and that's when I noticed something that bothered me a little. The back of the new house had these enormous windows, floor-to-ceiling glass panels facing directly toward my backyard. I remember standing on my deck one evening with my neighbor Dave from across the street, watching the framing go up. Dave squinted at it and said, "That's a lot of window pointed right at your place." I laughed it off. "Yeah, well, guess they like trees." But the truth was, I already had a feeling where this was headed. Privacy in suburbs is this weird, fragile thing. Technically, everyone has their own property. But if someone builds the wrong window in the wrong place, suddenly your backyard doesn't feel like yours anymore. Still, windows are windows. You can close blinds. I wasn't going to start a war over architecture. By late summer, the house was almost finished. White siding, black trim, that modern farmhouse style you see all over HGTV now. Clean lines, very deliberate. The backyard side of the house had this second-story living area with sliding glass doors that looked out over the property. At the time, that's all it was. Just doors, no balcony, no deck, nothing sticking out. Then in October, I had to leave town for a week. Guard training out in Missouri? Nothing dramatic, just routine stuff. I locked up the house, asked Dave to keep an eye on things, and figured when I came back, the construction would probably be done. And in a way, it was just not in the way I expected. Because when I pulled into my driveway that Sunday afternoon, rolled my suitcase through the side gate, and stepped into my backyard, the first thing I noticed wasn't the house. It was the shadow. A long rectangular shadow cutting across my lawn where the sunlight used to fall. I looked up, and there it was, a brand new second-story balcony hanging off the back of the Carter house. And it wasn't just close to the property line. It was over it. The structure extended several feet past their fence line directly over my yard. For a second, I honestly thought my brain was playing tricks on me. I walked closer, looked again. Nope. The beams were real. The posts were real. And one of those support posts was planted squarely inside my property line, right where the edge of my maple tree used to spread. Half the branches on that side were gone, cleanly cut and standing there in the grass. Looking at that balcony hanging over my yard like it owned the sky above it, I remember feeling the slow, quiet kind of anger start to rise. Not loud, not explosive, just the kind that settles deep in your chest because something about it felt deliberate. Like someone had looked at the boundary line and decided it didn't matter. I walked over to their back gate, knocked once. A moment later, the sliding door opened upstairs and Travis stepped out onto the brand new balcony. He leaned on the railing, smiling down at me like we were two neighbors chatting across a fence. And that's when he said something that told me. This whole situation was about to get a lot worse, but that part of the story comes next. Travis leaned on the railing of that brand new balcony like he was showing off a fresh paint job on a car. Big, relaxed smile, elbows resting on the wood, completely comfortable, standing on a structure that was literally hanging over my backyard. He looked down and said, "Hey man, you just get back." I stood there for a second, still trying to process what I was looking at. "Yeah," I said slowly. "Just got in." He nodded, like everything was perfectly normal. Then he tapped the railing proudly. "What do you think?" That question hung in the air for a second. I glanced up at the beams, then at the support post sitting inside my yard, then back at him. "What do I think about what?" He chuckled. "The balcony." I tilted my head. "Why is your balcony over my backyard?" His smile didn't disappear, but it definitely paused just for a split second. Then he shrugged. "It's just airspace." He said it casually, almost amused, like I had asked why clouds float. "It's not like we're using your lawn or anything." Now, if you've ever had someone say something that sounds completely insane, but they say it with total confidence, you know the feeling. Your brain kind of stalls. You're standing there thinking, did he really just say that? I pointed to the post. "That support beam is in my yard." He glanced down at it quickly, then waved his hand like it was no big deal. "Contractor handled all that." That sentence, I swear to God, every time someone says the contractor handled it, it usually means something very much did not get handled. I said, "My tree's been cut too." He leaned over the railing and looked at the maple branches like he was noticing them for the first time. "Oh yeah. They had to clear some space for the deck line." Deck-line. Like it was some technical necessity of the universe. I took a slow breath. "Did anyone ask me about that?" He scratched the back of his neck. I figured it'd be fine. That right there was the moment something shifted inside my head. Not rage, not yet. Just a realization. He didn't think this was a problem. He thought it was already settled. Like if you just build something big enough, people will accept it. I didn't argue with him right there. I just said, "I'll take a look at my survey." He nodded. "Sure thing, man." Then he stepped back inside like the conversation was finished. I walked back to my house, grabbed the folder where I kept all the paperwork from when I bought the property, and pulled out the land survey. Clear boundary lines, exact measurements. I walked back outside with a tape measure, measured from the fence, then from the post, then from the corner marker I had installed when I built the fence years earlier. The balcony wasn't barely crossing the line. It was hanging almost 3 feet over it, and that support post about 2 feet inside my property. I took photos, measured again, took more photos. Then I walked around the maple tree. The branches on one side had been cut back hard, not trimmed, not pruned, just removed to make room for the structure. They from across the street wandered over while I was standing there. He looked up. "Holy hell," he said. "Right?" I replied. He walked under the balcony squinting. "They built this while you were gone. Apparently," he whistled. "That's bold. Bold." That was a polite word for it. That night, I sat at my kitchen table looking through city zoning rules online. Turns out there are a lot of regulations about where structures can be built. Setbacks, property lines, encroachments, and balconies projecting over another property. Yeah, those get attention real fast. The next morning, I called the city building department. A woman named Carol answered. Calm voice. Sounded like she'd heard every kind of neighbor dispute imaginable. I explained the situation. There was a pause. Then she said, "Can you send photos?" I emailed them over. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. "Sir, that looks like a structural encroachment." That was the first time I heard that phrase. Structural encroachment, which basically means someone built something where they absolutely were not supposed to. She asked if I had a property survey. I did. Sent that too. Another pause. Then she said, "We'll send an inspector out." 3 days later, a city truck pulled up behind the Carter house. White pickup, clipboard, hard hat sitting on the dashboard. The inspector introduced himself as Mike. Nice guy. He's probably mid-50s. We walked the property line together while he took notes. He measured the post, measured the overhang. Then he looked up at the balcony. "Did they file a permit for this?" "I have no idea," I said. He nodded slowly. "Well, we're about to find out." He walked next door and knocked. Travis opened the door. From my yard, I could see the smile he usually wore slowly fade when he noticed the city truck. They talked for about 10 minutes. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I could see Mike pointing toward the post, then up toward the balcony. At one point, Travis gestured toward my yard like he was explaining something. Mike shook his head. Then he pulled something out of his folder. A bright orange notice, the kind you can see from across the street. He taped it to the sliding door that led out to the balcony. Even from where I stood, I could read the words. Violation notice. Work ordered halted. Travis stared at the paper like it had personally insulted him. That afternoon, he came over, knocked on my door. Different energy this time. No big smile. He said, "You called the city?" I leaned against the door frame. "Yeah." He exhaled through his nose. "You could have talked to me first." I almost laughed. I did. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, he said, "This is a minor encroachment. 2 feet of concrete in my yard isn't minor. It's just a post. It's my property." That's when Lindsay showed up behind him. She stepped forward like she was taking control of the situation. Her tone was smoother, more diplomatic. "Look," she said gently, "we're neighbors. We don't want this to turn into a big thing." I said, "Then move the balcony." She gave a small, tight smile. "That would require redesigning the roof line." There it was. The real issue: money, time. They built the structure the easiest way possible and gambled no one would fight it. "Music," she continued. "Maybe we can work something out." "Like what?" "Well, we could maintain the tree for you. Trim it professionally." I stared at her. "You already trimmed it." Her smile flickered. Travis's music jumped back in. "Listen, man. It's just airspace. It's not like we're walking around in your yard." I looked up at the balcony. Music from that angle, I could see straight into the second-floor windows of my house. Music my bedroom, my office, my deck, everything. "You realize from up there you can see directly into my house, right?" He shrugged. "So music can half the neighborhood." "No," I said calmly. "They can't." Another long silence. Finally, Lindsay Music said quietly, "Let's just see what the city says." I nodded. "Yeah, let's for the next couple weeks." Music things got tense. They weren't allowed to use the balcony. The violation notice music stayed taped to their door. Workers came by twice to measure things, then left again. Every time I walked into my backyard, I could see that structure hanging above me like a bad decision, frozen in wood and metal. One evening, Dave stopped by with a six-pack, and we sat under the maple tree looking up at it. "You think they'll actually have to tear it down?" he asked. I took a sip of beer. I don't know, but deep down, I had a feeling. Because once the city started digging into the paperwork, something else came to light. Something Travis definitely hadn't expected. And when that report came back, the entire situation flipped on its head. That's where the real turning point happened. About 3 weeks after the inspector first came out, I got a call from the city. Same woman as before, Carol. Her voice had that tone people use when they're trying to stay neutral. But I already know how the situation is going to land. She said the review is finished. I leaned back in my kitchen chair. "All right, what did you find?" There was a short pause while she shuffled papers. "Well, first thing is, the balcony structure was never permitted as a projecting deck." Not surprising. But then she added something else. "And the support posts are located 28 inside your property line." 28 in just over 2 feet, but hearing it stated officially made it feel different. "Not a measurement, a fact," she continued. "The homeowners were issued a structural encroachment violation. They've been given 30 days to correct it." Corrected how? Another pause. "Either remove the structure or relocate it so it complies with setback requirements." Which meant one thing, that balcony was coming down. When I hung up the phone, I stepped outside into the backyard and looked up at it again. It still cast that long shadow across the grass in the late afternoon sun. And for the first time since I'd seen it, I felt calm because the decision wasn't mine anymore. The city had made it. Now, here's the interesting part about situations like this. People always assumed the drama happens during the conflict, but honestly, the strangest part was the waiting. Those 30 days felt like this quiet standoff. Travis and Lindsay barely acknowledged me after that. No more smiles, no more casual chats over the fence. Sometimes I'd see Travis standing out there looking up at the balcony, like a man staring at a parking ticket he still didn't think he deserved. One afternoon, he walked over while I was raking leaves. He didn't step onto my yard this time, just stopped at the fence. "You're really going to make us tear that down?" he said. I leaned on the rake. "I didn't make that decision. You called the city. You built on my property." He exhaled slowly. "It's 2 feet. It's my 2 feet." He shook his head like he couldn't believe the conversation. "You know what this is going to cost?" I shrugged. "You should have thought about that before pouring concrete in my yard." For a second, I thought he might explode, but instead, he just stared at the ground, then walked back to his house. After that, we stopped speaking entirely. The violation notice stayed on the door. Bright orange, impossible to miss. Then, day 32 arrived. Early Monday morning, I heard the sound of trucks again, the same kind that had been there months earlier during construction. Only this time, they weren't delivering materials. They were taking them away. 3 workers climbed onto the balcony with crowbars and drills. I watched from my kitchen window while drinking coffee. They started with the railing, metal brackets popping loose one by one, then the deck boards. Each plank pried up with that sharp cracking sound wood makes when it's been screwed down tight. By mid-after afternoon, half the platform was gone. Travis stood in his yard watching the whole thing happen. Hands on his hips, not saying a word. I walked outside at one point and sat under the maple tree, just listening. There's something oddly satisfying about hearing a problem get dismantled piece by piece. Day 2, they removed the beams. Thick wooden supports that had been holding the structure out over my yard. When the last one came down, the balcony shrank back toward their house like it was retreating. By day 3, all that was left were the posts. Those were the hardest to remove. Concrete anchors sunk deep into the ground. The crew had to dig around them with shovels, break the base apart with a jackhammer, and haul the chunks out in buckets. I stood there when they pulled the final post out of the hole for the first time in over a month. There was nothing hanging over my yard, just open sky again. The foreman walked over to me afterward. Nice guy. He wiped his hands on his jeans and said, "Sorry you had to deal with that." I nodded. "Appreciate you fixing it." He gave a small laugh. "Wasn't our design." Then he headed back to the truck. The hole where the post had been was filled with fresh soil by the end of the afternoon. Grass seeds scattered over the top like it had never been there. The Carter house stayed quiet for a while after that. A couple weeks later, construction started again, but this time, it was different. The new balcony they built was smaller, pulled completely inside their property line, and instead of facing straight into my backyard, it angled off to the side. Whoever redesigned it made sure it didn't even look in my direction. I saw Travis out there once while they were finishing it. He noticed me in the yard and quickly looked away. We never had another real conversation after that. Not hostile, just distant, like two people who know exactly where the boundary line is now. And honestly, that was fine with me, because the backyard went back to being what it always was, quiet, private. On summer evenings, I'd sit under the maple tree again, watch the sunlight mow. Move across the grass, listen to the wind in the leaves. No shadows from someone else's balcony hanging over my head, just open space. And every now and then, I'd glance at that new deck behind the fence and think about how differently things could have gone if they had just knocked on my door first. Maybe we could have figured something out. Maybe not. But building over someone else's property and hoping they won't notice, that's a gamble. And sometimes, it's an expensive one. Now I'm curious what you would have done. If you came home one day and found out your neighbor had built part of their house over your yard, would you have ignored it, tried to work it out privately, or called the city like I did? Because some people say I overreacted. Others say I should have done it sooner. So I want to hear your take. Who was actually in the wrong here? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoy stories about real neighbor conflicts, property disputes, and the strange things people do when they think the rules don't apply to them, make sure you like the video and subscribe. Trust me, I've got plenty more stories like this.